Greetings everybody. Well, it's time for the long-awaited return of my Game of Thrones episode reviews. So today we're going to start things off with the first episode of Season 3, Valar Dohaeris. So beginning beyond the wall, in a prologue scene, shouts and sword clashes are heard in the darkness as the White Walkers and their army of undead whites attack the men of the Night's Watch off-screen in the Battle of the Fist of the First Men. Samuel Tarly is then seen wandering through a blizzard in search of safety. He sees another man of the Night's Watch up ahead, but soon finds that he has been decapitated and his head placed in his own hands. Just then, a White approaches Sam and is about to attack him with an axe when the dire wolf Ghost knocks it down. Ghost continues to tear out its legs as it pulls itself forward inch by inch towards Sam. The Whites suddenly burst into flame, destroyed by a torch wielded by Lord Commander Jorah Mormont, killing it. Mormont has managed to rally the few dozen survivors out of his original 300 men at the Fist of the First Men. Mormont is angry that Sam wasn't able to send off any messenger ravens in the confusion of the attack. Mormont announces that they must retreat back to the wall, not simply to save their own lives, but because Castle Black and the West of Westeros must be warned of the coming threat. Otherwise, everyone they've ever known will die. Meanwhile, Jon Snow is led by Ygritte and the Lord of Bones into the main wildling camp of the Frostfangs Mountains. It is not simply an army camp. Almost all wildling society is on the move to escape the White Walkers, including women and children. As they enter the camp, Jon is shocked to see a real-life giant walk past. Many of the wildlings are surprised to see Jon in his old black Night's Watch clothing and shout "Crow" at his approach. Several young boys pelt Jon with ice and small stones, but Ygritte shoos them away. Jon is led to the tent of King Beyond the Wall Mace Raider, Mance Raider, where the Lord of Bones explains that he is Eddard Stark's bastard son to a large man with a heavy beard who is eating chicken by the fire. He says that he doesn't care, but his interest is piqued on hearing that Jon killed Qohorin. As they talk, Jon kneels before the man, whom he assumes to be Mance Raider, and calls him Your Grace, as he would a king south of the wall. All the wildlings burst into laughter. Their society does not bother with such ceremony, and because the man actually isn't Mance Raider, but is Lieutenant Tormund. Mance himself is an unassuming man sitting in a corner, who then introduces himself and tells Jon to stand, as no man kneels before another among the free folk, as they do not recognize the class and nobility in their culture. Mance says he is glad that Jon killed Qohorin, as he had killed many of Mance's wildlings, though he knows that Qohorin was his brother once, back when he was a member of the Night's Watch and Qohorin had a whole hand. Mance asks Jon why he wants to join them. He replies he wants to be free, but Mance thinks he just wants to be hero. Jon then explains that when the Night's Watch camped at Craster's Keep, he saw Craster leave his newborn son in the woods as an offering, and the inhuman creature that took it. Jon says that he wants to leave the Night's Watch because he's disgusted that Mormont already knew what Craster was doing but did nothing to stop it. Jon states that the first men he has descended from defeated the White Walkers once during the Long Night, and that now he wants to fight for the society who fights for the living. Mance is satisfied and advises Jon to get a new cloak. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, King Joffrey Baratheon's forces stand victorious after the Battle of the Blackwater. House Lannister's new allies, House Tyrell, begin to settle into the capital. Tywin Lannister blatantly tells his son Tyrion that he intends to disinherit him. This comes as a shock, because his older brother Jaime gave up all right to inherit his father's lands when he joined the Kingsguard, and Tyrion is rightfully the next in line of succession. For that matter, despite all evidence to the contrary, Tywin refuses to believe that Tyrion was in any way helpful in the defense of the city or during his months as acting hand of the king. Instead, Tywin essentially maintains his belief that Tyrion is a whoremongering, drunken, ill-made, spiteful little creature, and that he is lying about all of his accomplishments out of envy. Tywin was particularly insulted that Tyrion brought his mistress Shae to the capital when Tywin explicitly told him not to, which makes Tywin convince himself that Tyrion was in bed with Shae most of the time while events spiraled out of control. When Tyrion asks why his father's doing this, Tywin is shocked as if Tyrion insulted him, and says it should be obvious as Tyrion killed his mother Joanna in childbirth so that he might enter the world. Tywin says that the laws of men says he has to let Tyrion use his family name, but he wishes he could prove Tyrion wasn't his son, so his very existence would not continue to make a mockery out of the name Lannister, which he stole from Tywin. Tyrion fumes at the situation to his sellsword Bronn, who has recently been knighted as a reward for his service in the Battle of the Blackwater. He now styles himself as Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, and while possessing no lands, wealth, or title, this drastically elevates his social standing, and in his mind, his pay. Meanwhile, Joffrey's ride back from the Great Sept to Baelor in a heavily guarded palanquin is interrupted when his betrothed, Lady Margaery Tyrell, stops the procession Flea Bottom unexpectedly. Marjorie shocks the guards and bewilders Joffrey by getting out and exploring, eventually arriving in an orphanage and interacting with the children. Meanwhile, her servants pass up bread and toys, earning her the love of Flea Bottom's small folk. That evening, Joffrey and Cersei visit Marjorie and her brother Loras Tyrell for a small dinner party. Cersei admonishes Marjorie's boldness and reminds her that her impromptu charity work took place on the same streets where the royal party was assaulted weeks earlier. When Joffrey naively defends Marjorie and criticizes his mother, Cersei realizes that she is on the verge of being outmaneuvered. Cersei only knows how to rule through fear, but Marjorie knows how to win the love of the people she rules over, a skill Cersei lacks. Sansa Stark and Shae sit on the docks watching ships arrive and depart. Sansa wants to play a game making up stories about where the ships are headed, but Shae, in typical fashion, is uninterested. Peter Baelish arrives to speak with Sansa. She displays an eagerness to leave as soon as possible. He suggests that when he next leaves the capital by sea, she might be able to stow away. Sansa advises him not to give her too many details since she is a terrible liar. Meanwhile, Ross, who seems to be acting as Littlefinger's aide, reminisces about the day Sansa was born, when all the bells in Winterfell were rung in celebration. She asks Shae to look out for Sansa, particularly in regards to Littlefinger. Davos Seaworth's rescued from the sea by Salador's son after being overthrown by the wildfire blast in the battle. Forlorn over the death of his son Mathos, Davos feels that Melisandre has led Stannis to disaster, and is horrified to from Salador that she has begun to conduct human sacrifices. After the defeated remnant of Stannis' forces returned to the island, Melisandre ordered any who spoke out against her to be burned alive as offerings to the Lord of Light. Davos convinces Salador to bring him to Dragonstone. On Dragonstone, King Stannis' Baratheon's shattered forces regroup after being almost totally destroyed in the Battle of Blackwater. Davos returns and finds Stannis despondent, sitting in the chamber of the painted table alone with Melisandre. Davos openly calls Melisandre his enemy, condemns her for conducting human sacrifices, and says she is leading Stannis astray. She counters that it was Davos who urged Stannis not to bring her to the battle, and implies it was actually Davos' fault that thousands of their men burned to death, including his own son. And the mention of his son Davos draws a knife on her in a fit of anger, but he is restrained by the guards, and Stannis orders him put in the dungeon. Ugh. Meanwhile, at Harrenhal, in the Riverlands, the morale of King Robb Stark's army is starting to wane. They have not had a significant victory since the Battle of Oxcross months ago, and the news of Lannister's victory over Stannis and new alliances with the Tyrells piles bad news upon bad news. Robb has won every battle he's ever fought, but the Lannisters finally realized it was too difficult to try to attack him head-on, so they've shifted to a new strategy of simply fleeing ahead of Robb's army. Robb's forces have won many small but also insignificant minor victories, as the Lannisters are determined to simply wait Robb out and exhaust his army far from home, while they slowly rebuild their own numbers to gain new allies. In frustration, Robb launches a new offensive to the east, which takes the great castle of Harrenhal, which Tywin had been using as his main Lannister forward base in the Riverlands during the first year of the war. However, Robb does not find the decisive victory he was hoping for. Tywin drew his garrison to King's Landing to counter the attack by Stannis, and didn't even bother wasting any men on a token defense of the castle. Robb's forces are further demoralized to find the Lannisters massacred 200 northern and Riverlands prisoners of war before they left. The courtyards are choked with piles of bodies. They do find one survivor, a maester named Qyburn. And then, finally, in Slaver's Bay, Daenerys Targaryen's ship arrives at the city of Astapor in Slaver's Bay after leaving Karth. Daenerys' dragons are continuing to grow and are about the size of small dogs. They fly by their ship as it approaches the city, plucking fish from the sea and roasting them in midair with their fire breath. She knows that they are still not big enough to use as weapons of war to invade Westeros with, and that she needs an army. Sir Jorah Mormont knows that the elite war eunuchs produced in Astapor, known as the Unsullied, are said to be among the finest soldiers in the world. Daenerys stresses that they are slave soldiers, a distinction which may some look on her negatively in Westeros where slavery is illegal, but Jorah says they have no better ideas for how to acquire an army. Daenerys expresses interest in expanding her time with Dothraki Khalasar. Most of them were seasick because the Dothraki have never traveled on ships before. But Jorah says that other Dothraki will only join her if they think she is strong, and for that she needs an army. Upon arriving at Astapor, Daenerys is given a tour of the Unsullied barracks by Unsullied's owner, Crassus Nakklaws, with the slave girl Missandei translating Slow Valyrian into the common tongue of Westeros for Daenerys. They explain that the Unsullied are trained for battle from the age of 5, and that only 1 in 4 recruits survives the training. Crassus also demonstrates that the Unsullied do not fear pain or death by slicing off the nipple of one soldier, much as Daenerys has discussed, who not only shows no sign of pain, but thanks the slave master for the opportunity to serve him. Crassus goes on to explain that the Unsullied are trained to show no mercy or weakness by killing a newborn slave child in front of its mother at the end of their training. Daenerys is outraged by this, but still asks how many Unsullied are available. She is told there are 8,000 soldiers for sale and that she has until the next day to make a decision. En route back to their ship, Ser Jorah urges that Daenerys should purchase the Unsullied, arguing that under her command, the slave soldiers will have a far better quality of life serving her than they would under Crassus and his ilk. Daenerys is distracted by a playing child following her and Jorah, and neither notices a man in a hooded black cloak following them, armed with a dagger. The child offers a gift to Daenerys, a wooden ball, but as she picks it up, the hooded stranger knocks it out of her hands. Ser Jorah grabs the stranger and their struggle knocks Daenerys to the ground, where to her horror, the ball cracks in half and a manticore emerges to attack. Before the creature can harm Daenerys with its lethal sting, the stranger impales it with his dagger and charges at the child, who hisses in a reptilian manner, baring teeth and features reminiscent of Pyat Pri, and uses magic to escape. Daenerys realizes the assassin was like an agent of surviving warlocks of Karth. Turning her attention to her savior, Daenerys is surprised when the man addresses her as his queen and removes his hood. She asks if Jorah knows the man. As Jorah admits he does, the stranger before them is one of the most skilled fighters in Westeros, Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard. Falling to his knees, Sir Barristan explains that following Robert's death and his dismissal by Joffrey, he has been searching for Daenerys Stormborn, to beg her forgiveness and offer his service, hoping to make amends for failing House Targaryen during and after Robert's rebellion, when he served in her father's Kingsguard. Barristan hails her as the rightful queen and asks to serve in her Queen's Guard. Nice. So let's take a look at some notes surrounding this episode. This episode was dedicated to the memory of Martin Kenzie, a cinematographer and second unit director who worked on Blackwater and Valar Dohaeris, and passed away at the age of 56 between Season 2 and Season 3. The soundtrack playing over the credits is a rendition of the main theme. It appeared in the official soundtrack released for Season 1, titled Game of Thrones. This episode features one of the very rare instances, if not the only time in the whole series, that Cersei and Bronn appear in the same scene. The reason is that prior to being cast, Lena Headey and Jerome Flynn ran a relationship that ended on such bad terms that each has a clause inserted into their contracts that they were never to share scenes and must remain apart on set. Valar Dohaeris is High Valyrian, the response phrase to Valar Morghulis, the title of the Season 2 finale. Commonly used in Bravos, Valar Morghulis means all men must die, in the sense of all men must eventually die sooner or later, and Valar Dohaeris means all men must serve. Interestingly, the words are not spoken at any point during the episode, and will not be spoken until the climb. This episode marks the introduction of a Low Valyrian language, spoken by Missandei and others in Slaver's Bay. Daenerys has in previous episodes demonstrated an understanding of High Valyrian, the language from which Low Valyrian is derived. High Valyrian was designed by linguist David J. Peterson, who wrote sentences down in the language, then applied phonological, semantic, and grammatical changes to seem like Giscaric influence and create the slavers Bay Low Valyrian heard in the episode. The storylines of Arya Stark, Bran and Rickon Stark, Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth, and House Greyjoy do not appear in this episode. A few scenes with Arya Stark were filmed for the first episode of Season 3, but it was later decided that the episode was getting overcrowded, so all Arya's scenes were removed to the next episode. Both episodes had the same director anyway, Daniel Minahan, though the Season 3 premiere was written by Benioff and Weiss, while the second episode is written by Vanessa Taylor. This episode marks the introduction of the non-human race of giants. Previous episodes occasionally referred to them in the context of being mythical creatures, but this episode confirms that they are a real race which survives beyond the Wall. In the novels, giants are described as being more ape-like, forsaking clothes as they are covered in shaggy fur. When Cersei meets Tyrion for the first time after the battle, she says she heard he had lost his nose, but the scar across his face isn't as gruesome as that. In the books, Tyrion did indeed have the front of his nose cut off when Sir Medemore attempted to kill him. The TV series decided not to do this as it would have been difficult and more expensive to achieve the effect, and it would have limited Peter Dinklage's acting performance. There was significant construction work underway in King's Landing, with scaffolding surrounding towers along the walls. The reasons for this are unclear, given that this construction work is not present in the books. It is possible this is meant to show repairs are being underway to the city following the battle, even though during the battle there was no indication of King's Landing suffering an artillery bombardment. Ron mentions that the Lannisters have been running from us since Oxcross. This is the first time that the Battle of Oxcross has been actually referred to by name on screen. The battle actually occurred in the 4th episode of Season 2, Garden of Bones, but at this point, Game of Thrones Wiki has been conjecturally referring to it as the Battle of Oxcross, based on information from the books. This confirms that the location of the battle was unchanged in the TV continuity. This is the second time, following the Prince of Winterfell, that Rickard Karstark speaks about his dead sons, without mentioning their first names. Rickard refers to Jaime as their killer, although he previously said that one of them was strangled by Jaime, and the other died fighting by Robb's side, without specifying who killed him and in which battle. The combination of the two aforementioned references indicates that Harrion was killed by Jaime at the Battle of the Whispering Wood. The new strategy that the Lannisters are using post-Oxcross is called the Fabian strategy in real life, so named after the Roman general Fabius Maximus Concator. After the Carthaginian general Hannibal destroyed the Roman army at Cannae in 216 BC, the Roman Senate finally realized that it would be all but impossible to beat Hannibal in a pitched battle. Instead, they wasted no resources on attempts to give battle, falling back and harassing Hannibal's forces to wear down his supplies. Bronn dismissively tells Sir Mayor Trent that he is more skilled at beating helpless girls than fighting at real men. Meryn publicly beats Sansa Stark in front of the entire court, also in Garden of Bones. Tywin Lannister says 3 out of the 7 kingdoms are in open rebellion. The Northern Islands are clearly in revolt, but it isn't clear if he is counting the Riverlands as the Third Kingdom, or considering them an extension of the North, in which case the Third Kingdom is the Stormlands under Stannis. Tywin might consider Stannis such a spent force that he doesn't consider the Stormlands as an open rebellion anymore. After the Battle of Blackwater, several of the Stormlords are captured and bend the knee, leaving Stannis only Storm's End as some of the Lords of the Narrow Sea that remain loyal to him. The HBO Go interactive feature confirms that Tywin means the North, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands. Stannis, even if he's been driven back to Dragonstone, has very different rebel factions. Thus he generally refers to Robb's entire domain, which he claims is both the North and the Riverlands, as the North. It is also possible that Tywin did include the Riverlands as a kingdom, as historically it was part of the Kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers, having been conquered by the Ironborn. When Tyrion asks for at least some gratitude in his vital role in the defense of the city during the Battle of the Blackwater, His father Tywin bluntly brushes his request aside by saying the Lannisters don't do things to earn rewards. However, Tywin himself arranged for Joffrey to reward him with the made-up title of Savior of the City as a reward for his role in the same battle. The ship that Daenerys sails in was actually a reuse of a prop designed and built by Gemma Jackson's production team for Season 2, which put out fire during the Battle of the Blackwater. The series actually has only one prop boat, as they're quite expensive, which had to redress to represent every scene taking place on the ship in the TV series, i.e. the same prop as also Fury and Black Betha in the Battle of the Blackwater. The ship was constructed in Banbridge, Northern Ireland, and wouldn't have made sense to move it for scenes entirely set on the ship, so Daenerys' scenes on the ship were filmed in Northern Ireland. This makes the only scene Emilia Clarke filmed in Northern Ireland set in Morocco for Season 3. Filming for the scene took only 1 day. This episode was nominated for three 2013 Primetime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Prosthetic Makeup for a Single Camera Series, Outstanding Visual Effects, and Outstanding Art Director for a Single Camera Series, and went to win the award for Outstanding Visual Effects. Nice. So overall, I think that this episode is pretty good, and I like the fact that it establishes some plot points that we'll be seeing for the rest of the season, and some others that we'll see later on down the road. So, yeah. So, overall, I give Valar Dohaeris 4 Iron Thrones out of 5. When I tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the next episode, Dark Wings, Dark Words. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.